So one thing we've been talking about in the course is the long tail of popularity, which I guess goes back to Chris Anderson's phrase, where you say like, there's this big distribution of popularities, and there's like a few blockbusters that just get a huge amount of attention, but then a lot of things are just these really niche items. And you think about like long tail for books, like a book that only sells 1,000 copies but has a fan base, or a movie that's like an independent movie, not a big studio movie. But I guess in some sense, Facebook goes like even way further down the long tail, because a book that sells 1,000 copies versus say like someone's photo of the family picnic, like that's even way further down the tail. So like, do you guys think of yourselves as you're sort of building on, like you're sort of going even further down the long tail than?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I hadn't thought about it in these terms before, but when you bring it up, almost all of Facebook is the long tail, right? Any one of us is not sort of in the head, with a few sort of notable exceptions. Almost all of us have, our circle of a few hundred friends, and those are the only people who are seeing most of our content. And so almost all of Facebook is sort of built on this long tail. It is really about you interacting with your friends and seeing the things that your friends do, and even the sort of most interesting and engaging things that you would post about like the biggest events in your life, they're still mostly just going to be seen by your few hundred friends. Right. And that isn't to say that we don't have these sort of head publishers and things like that. And so, if you think about it in terms of the kind of friendship graph, which is kind of inherently long tail because people only have so many friends, but then there's also this other side of Facebook, which is the kind of public content of the pages and celebrities and things like that. And so you end up with this sort of mix of a lot of what you do on Facebook is interact with your friends and is very much about the long tail, but then you also get a certain amount of this sort of head content of, Lady Gaga posts about her latest song and things like that, and she has 40 million followers or whatever.
Right. So it's sort of like, there's a head of the distribution, like small number of things, big following, and then you've got, and I mean, so in some sense, that's another thing that Newsfeed has to manage, which is it's sort of up to you guys how much tail content I see and how much head content I see, because stuff's coming at me, and there's going to be a mix, right? And is it like it's sort of that mix plays out in different ways. Like you can experiment with how much of the pages I follow versus friends, or how much it's sort of or it's sort of separate from the strong tie weak tie, because strong tie weak tie may be all in the tail.
Sure.
But then I've got this other thing about how much do I get this content that's universally popular.
Yeah, although I don't think that plays a big role in how we think about. Like we're not trying to show this much head content, this much tail content. It's really, for all of it, it's just sort of content and how interesting is it to you, right? I mean, some people are going to be much more interested in, they're going to use Facebook just to interact with their friends. And then even if they're connected to a bunch of large pages, if all they ever interact with is the content from their friends, that's what's going to show up prominently. Whereas, on the other hand, certain people are definitely, they're using Facebook less for the sort of social aspect, but more because they want to follow all these pages and get their news from sources that are on Facebook. And so, while there certainly is this sort of head content and tail content, from an individual's point of view, it's all just kind of stuff, and like we're trying to show you the most interesting stuff and tailor it to you as much as possible.
Right.
So
I see. So it's almost like it's sort of not a property of Facebook so much as like a property of the individual. Like some individuals sort of spend their time looking at stuff in the tail, and some individuals spend their time sort of marveling at the high attention stuff in the head of the distribution. And it's possible to use it both ways, and then you'll get these signals from what I engage with, and then you'll
Yeah, and I mean there's some mix, right? Like it might be that I'm connected to a dozen pages and they're all huge, but one of them is the one that I'm really interested in, and I interact with it whenever I see those stories, and we'll show you that one a bunch, and the other 11 won't show you. Even though to a certain extent all 12 of them are roughly the same sort of properties at a high level. What really matters is how much do you as the viewer sort of engage with that.
Right. But yeah, so there's an interesting knife edge, because like it would of course be too bad if like all the usage began to tilt one way or the other, and the other side atrophied, right? Like it all became sort of focusing on the head, and then the social sharing, kind of, which I guess somehow the trick is to keep things balanced across that whole distribution.
Yeah, although I mean, to a large extent, this seems like it happens naturally. It's not something that we've actually had to think about that much. I think most people are interested in both, and they want to see both types of content. And a lot of people are consuming, a lot of what their friends are doing, and also a lot of what this sort of page is. So, I don't know. It's not something that we have to play with that much. It kind of just emerges.
So that's just naturally how people look at content. So,
yeah.